Good morning and buenos dias. I am Abu Sha'b and welcome back for another lesson in Puerto Rican expressions. Today I want to talk a little bit about Spanish names. When I lived up in the States, I noticed that many Anglos, as well as many governmental agencies, don't understand how Spanish names work. Movies don't help either when you have Latin characters that rattle off 9 or 10 names like that's what's on their driver's license. That's not the case. However, the phrase last name in English is a part of the problem because last name is our surname, our father's family name. It happens to be in the last position in Anglo culture, and because of that we often assume that it's the same in other cultures. But like in Chinese culture, first it's the family name, then the other names, and then finally, at the end, is your first name or your birth name, your christened name. Now in Spanish culture, in Latin America, there are 4 legal names on documentation, like the birth certificate, for example. A birth certificate in formal Spanish is el acta de nacimiento, the act of birth. Here in Puerto Rico, most people say certificado de nacimiento because of the tremendous influence that English has on Puerto Rican Spanish. However, in countries like Argentina or Colombia, you will hear el acta de nacimiento. The 4 legal names that are on documentation in Spanish-speaking countries are the first name, the christened name, your birth name, your first name, the second name, which we would call the middle name in English, the father's last name, and then a hyphen generally, and the mother's last name. Now the important one is the one that's in the 3rd position, the father's last name, that's the surname. Many Anglos mistakenly take the last position name, which is the mother's last name, which we would call mother's maiden name in English. However, in Spanish culture, the woman does not change her name when she gets married. She retains her father's last name throughout her life. If this person from a Spanish-speaking country seeks documentation in an English-speaking country, he loses the last name, the mother's last name, and it becomes the mother's maiden name, as we say in English culture. To ask somebody what their last name is here in Puerto Rico, we generally say, ¿Cuál es su apellido? Which is your last name? This is formal Spanish. In Mexican slang, I've heard it, ¿Cómo te apellidaste? But you won't hear anything like that here in Puerto Rico. Now there's another particularity about Latin culture throughout the Spanish-speaking world that doesn't exist in English, and English speakers often have a little bit of trouble understanding it. And that's the difference between the formal and the familiar in you. Now English doesn't have this feature. It did with the thee and thou from Shakespearean literature and the King James Bible, but over time thee and thou was lost. I believe thee and thou were the familiar form and you is the formal form, but now in modern English when you want to speak more formally you just use better words like ma'am and sir, and a more respectful tone. However, in Spanish culture, we use the formal like in formal situations. In the bank, at the doctor's office, meetings with our children's teachers, government agencies, things like that, we'll generally use the formal. Familiars in familiar relationships, obviously. Now, one verb that most people are familiar with is estar. Estar is to be, your state, how are you? ¿Cómo tú estás? This is familiar for how are you. You can say ¿Cómo estás without the pronoun to, and people will understand. Because of the S at the end of estás, people know that you're using the familiar, that you're speaking to, in the form of to. However, if you say ¿Cómo está?, people know that you're being more respectful, that you're using usted. Usted is the formal you, it's the word for you. It's pronounced usted. In many countries you don't even hear the D, it's just usted. One situation where it can change rapidly from usted to tu, or to usted. 2 friends are talking and they start arguing about something, and all of a sudden the defenses go up, they might switch to usted until the situation calms down. ¿Usted se cree eso? Oh, you think that? Another situation where we change from to formal Spanish really quickly is when we're scolding our children. You can be talking all sweet to your kid, saying, ¿Cómo tú estás? ¿Qué necesitas tú hoy? And you turn your back for a minute, they climb up on the table. Instantly, you will be addressing them in formal Spanish. Bájase usted de esa mesa ahora mismo. Bájase usted. Get down, you, from that table right now. Bájase usted de esa mesa ahora mismo. Then after the scolding is over, you go back to the to form. Well, I hope you learned something about Latin culture. Thank you very much and have a great day.